I think it's starting. Yes.
So the last section we're going to do is across the top bit here. We're going to bag it to the inside. First thing we need to do though is, just like with our pivot corners, any corners that are internal corners or corners that curve into themselves, we need to clip into, like this one here, so it goes in. We need to clip into like that so that it can actually turn the other way. We know that this corner here, because it's a corner that goes like that, we don't need to clip into him. It's just the ones that are what I call internal corners that we need to clip into so they clip out. If you're not sure, come and see me and we'll help you with that. There should be another one on your other, one on each side basically. So that will be the top of that completely all stitched. Flip it the other way. Like when it's inside out. That one there is another internal one, and it's 2 lining corners we're clipping into, just 2 lining corners. Clipping into so that they can pull the other way. Once we've clipped into those 2 lining corners, what you'll find is it'll then be able to sit nice and flat. We're going to pull that lining down so that all those seams come out. I think I did this one. Alrighty, so all those seams will then pop out. This is the seam that you didn't stitch all the way. You stopped at the stop sign, and there are your 2 clipped in seams that have opened out. We now need to pin them and all together. We're not going to stitch it through our main yet. We're going to stitch them all together just on the internal parts. That corner there and that corner there both need to match. Okay, so if I separate them out, that corner there, absolute match. So we're going to put a pin through those 2 corners. And this other internal corner here, which is the loose one on the middle, okay, that's our kick pleat side. That needs to be level at the top on the inside and meeting. Don't let it set away from that point. Let it go right up and meet right next to the other stitch line, okay? If you need help with this, come and ask, because we can help you to pin it. You need to get this pinning right for it to sit nice and neat and flat, okay? What I'm going to do then is basically we're going to stitch from that point to that point, or we can actually stitch all the way through, but mainly we're stitching from point to point, okay? You might find, depending on how it's sitting, making sure as you're stitching you want to make sure that all your cut edges are sitting nice and flat and meeting at that top edge here at the top of your kick pleat. You might find that your lining, because it's biased, your lining might stretch a bit, so it might buckle a bit, so you just need to make sure that that's sitting nice and flat. You can either choose to put it down on your feed dogs to help you with that, or you can choose to stitch it from the top side, but where I'm stitching from is that point to that point there, okay, in between those 2 points. Now ideally when you do this, it should actually be a 1 centimetre seam allowance, but what's more important is that you're matching point to point. That's what's more important, okay? So in some people, you might find that your 1 centimetre seam allowance is a bit smaller or a bit bigger. Ignore that, but if it's ideally, if it's absolutely perfect and you've matched all your points to points, it will be a 1 centimetre seam allowance. But if not, it's more important that you stitch from point to point. Making sure that there's this excess, like I'm saying with the bias of your lining, is all eased in so that it's not sitting external. Let's open it out and see that it should sit from this side nice and flat. Double check that your hems are level. If they're not level, you can go back in and adjust them so that they are level. But probably don't adjust your pivot corner end. This is the easier end to adjust. Okay, so to adjust that to make sure it's right. The lucky last thing we need to do, because at the moment you'll see that it's kind of not attached to the main. So now we need to attach that to the main now that we've got that end, and we just want to attach it, literally fold it nice and flat, open it out again, and now we're going to stitch it through all of our layers, our main and our kick pleat all at once. You can, if you're an expert machinist, you could do that all in one go, both together at the same time, but what you'll find is because this moves around, and because it's on the bias, you'll find it easier to stitch that first and then top stitch it down afterwards. Okay. Now in terms of top stitching, you can either choose to, it's easier to top stitch it from this side down, but just straight through there through all your layers. But if you have a specific top stitch thread and you like the way the top stitch looks, do it from your good side. And then stitch, because I pin from point to point, so I know that that's where I'm going to be stitching from. And then do it from the good side. But if you're not fussed about what your top stitching looks like, You guys know that top stitching sometimes, depending on if your tension's not absolutely perfect, can look different from the top side and the underside. So if you want it to look absolutely perfect, if it's a really expensive jacket that you're doing, yep, okay. Pull out your pins. Should be all nice and neat, top stitched in place, okay? Done. That's your last step. So the first thing you need to do is to clip into those external corners on your linings, one on each side of your pleats, and then pull. Once you've clipped into those corners, flip that lining down, pull all of those edges out, make sure you match that point with that point, make sure your under pleat is sitting nice and level at the top, and then you need to stitch just for the kick pleat section only across the top of that. Okay, go for it.